let's dive right into this explainer. Most of us in Australia are sold the exact same story the second we finish school. Get a job, work for 40 or 45 years, put a bit into super, and then somewhere around 65 or 67, you finally get to live. But today, we're looking at how everyday people are completely rewriting those rules to retire in their 30s and 40s. Here is the exact blueprint we're going to walk through today to help you move from living paycheck to paycheck straight into genuine financial freedom. We'll cover the broken timeline, unlocking your FIRE number, building the bridge with super, accelerating your savings, and the psychology of patience. Starting with part 1. The broken retirement timeline. Look, that old playbook used to make sense back when houses cost what, 3 times a salary? Back when a single income could actually raise a family. But here we are in 2026, and the traditional math just does not add up the same way anymore. Living costs just keep climbing, right? And mortgages are literally stretching into people's 60s. The idea of working until you're old enough for the age pension at 67 honestly feels less like a plan and way more like a sentence. Sacrificing your best years simply to pay the bills is a default timeline we want to avoid. So the question becomes incredibly obvious. Is it actually possible to retire early in Australia? And if so, how early are we talking? Well, the honest answer is absolutely yes. People are doing it right now, in their 40s and even their late 30s. It just requires a complete shift in how you view money and time. That brings us to part 2, unlocking your FIRE number. To escape this decades-long grind, we need to completely redefine what retirement means. We have to stop viewing it as an age dictated by the government and start treating it as a mathematical target. The whole concept is called FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. The idea is wonderfully simple, even if the execution takes some serious discipline. You're basically building a pile of invested money large enough that the returns alone cover your yearly living costs. Once that pile is big enough, you literally don't need a job to survive. Your money does the working for you. There's a classic rule of thumb based on decades of research into safe withdrawal rates. It basically says that if you can live off just 4% of your portfolio each year, your money should last 30 years or more. So check this out. If you spend $50,000 a year, your target, your FIRE number is $1.25 million. If you spend $80,000, you need $2 million. Knowing your specific FIRE number changes everything because suddenly retirement stops being an age and starts being a target you can actually hit. All right, part 3. Superannuation and the bridge. Figuring out your number is just the beginning. Now we have to look at how the unique rules of the Australian system can become your absolute greatest asset. You generally can't touch your superannuation until preservation age.
right? Which is 60 for almost everyone retiring from here on out. I know that sounds like a massive roadblock, but it's actually a gift if you use it right. You need to build what's called the bridge of outside investments to live on before you hit 60, while using super as the foundation to fund everything after.
Because super is without a doubt the most tax-effective investment vehicle in the country. Contributions through salary sacrifice are taxed at just 15%, rather than your marginal rate, which probably sits between 30 and 45%. And with the July 2026 caps rising to $32,500 a year for concessional and a massive $130,000 for non-concessional, that means so much more room to shovel money into a low-tax environment and let compounding do its job for decades. So what makes up that bridge outside of super? It could be investment properties or a business, but the simplest approach most early retirees lean on is broad-based index investing through low-cost ETFs. Funds that track the ASX 300 or global markets have historically returned around 7 to 9% a year on average after inflation. You don't need to pick stocks, and you definitely don't need to time the market. You just consistently buy in month after month, year after year through every headline and every crash. Of course, the Australian Tax Office still wants its cut along the way, but understanding things like franking credits, capital gains tax discounts after holding shares for 12 months, and how dividends are taxed will literally save you thousands over a decade. None of this is complicated once you sit with it for a weekend. It just isn't taught in school, which is why most people never get started. Which brings us to part 4. Accelerating your savings rate. Look, earning a great income or understanding ETFs is completely useless if you just spend everything that hits your bank account. It's time for the brutal yet incredibly liberating math of saving. The average Aussie saves around 5 to 10% of their income, taking roughly 50 years to retire. But people chasing FIRE, they save 40, 50, sometimes even 70%. If you save 50%, it takes around 17 years. If you push that to 65%, you're looking at about 10 short years from your first invested dollar to total financial independence. The math is brutal, sure, but it means you have way more control over your timeline than your salary alone suggests. So how do you actually push your savings rate that high when Sydney and Melbourne rents alone can swallow a third of your pay? You go straight after the big 3: housing, transport, and food. Together, these categories make up about 60% of the average household budget. Trimming these major expenses moves the needle far more than debating over your daily coffee ever will. We're talking house hacking by renting out a spare room to slash your biggest expense, or keeping a reliable used car for 10 years to dodge those massive depreciation traps, choosing to cook at home 5 nights a week. These structural lifestyle choices are exactly what fast-track your freedom. But keep in mind, there is a hard ceiling on frugality, right? You can only cut your budget so much before you're squeezing blood from a stone. But there is absolutely no ceiling on earning. So treat your career as your biggest asset in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. Negotiating a pay rise, getting a new certification, or starting a side business will dramatically boost your income engine. And we've got to talk about debt. Every single dollar you owe on high interest debt actively fights your investments. You need to wipe out anything above a 7% interest rate, like those 20% credit cards, buy now, pay later schemes, or 14% personal loans as an absolute emergency. Now, a 6% mortgage, that's a bit different and can usually be balanced out alongside your investing. All right, finally, part 5, the psychology of patience. Because honestly, the math we've covered today is pretty simple, but surviving the early slog and actually executing the plan takes serious mental discipline. There's a famous saying in investing that the first $100,000 is the hardest you'll ever earn. And it is so true. Watching your portfolio crawl in those early years is painfully slow. It feels like you're making massive sacrifices for tiny returns, and you really just have to grit your teeth and push through right before compounding takes over. But then a magical thing happens. The second 100,000 comes a little faster. And by the time you pass $500,000 invested, a standard 10% market return means your portfolio is generating $50,000 all on its own. The market can actually contribute more than your salary in a good year. That is when the whole wealth building process starts to feel almost automatic. At the end of the day, retiring early isn't really about hating work. It's about owning your time and having options. Financial independence gives you ultimate control. If your health takes a turn or your industry completely shifts, you are totally protected from the anxiety of needing a paycheck. So follow these steps consistently. Work out your exact FIRE number. Attack the big 3 to push your savings rate as high as possible. Build your bridge with ETFs and lay your foundation with super. Wipe out that high interest debt and stay invested consistently for 10 to 20 years. Do that, and early retirement stops being a fantasy and becomes a concrete date on your calendar. It all starts with a simple choice. Accept the default timeline or build your own. So I want you to really think about this. If this explainer resonated with you at all, use these tools to start taking your time back. Ask yourself, what would you actually do tomorrow if your money already did the working?